17. That is the number of times the phrase, "those who instructed," appears in formal Egyptian royal inscriptions before the New Kingdom. In every single instance, the word used for instructed is not the word for taught, mentored, or trained. It is the word for contracted, a transaction, an exchange with recorded terms. The Egyptians did not describe receiving their knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and stonework the way a student receives a lesson. They described it the way a scribe records a debt. Something was given, something was owed. The records of what was owed have been held in 3 separate restricted archives across 2 continents for over a century. One of those archives was specifically reclassified in 2003. The reclassification has never been explained publicly. You were taught that Egyptian civilization arose. The Egyptian records say it was purchased. Those are not the same thing. If forbidden ancient history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week we decode what Egyptologists won't translate publicly. The Palermo stone is a 5th dynasty basalt fragment currently held across 3 institutions. The Regional Archaeological Museum in Palermo as the primary fragment, the Cairo Museum under fragment designation CG 14165, and the Petrie Museum in London under fragment UC 15508. The combined fragments constitute the oldest surviving royal annal in Egyptian history, dated to approximately 2400 BCE. The text records year-by-year events from the reigns of early dynastic pharaohs in the same flat administrative register, used for flood levels, cattle counts, and temple construction budgets. Mainstream Egyptology treats the stone's pre-dynastic section, the upper register, which predates Narmer, as mythological preamble, gods and semi-divine figures with impossibly long reigns, included to lend cosmological legitimacy to human rulers. The scholarly consensus, codified since Heinrich Brugsch's 19th century readings and reinforced by Alan Gardner's 1945 analysis, holds that this section is ritual, not record. The problem with that consensus is grammatical, and it has never been resolved. The pre-dynastic upper register uses the exact same verb tenses, the exact same administrative determinatives, and the exact same regnal year notation format as the verified historical section directly below it. When Egyptian scribes wrote mythology, they used a distinct set of grammatical markers. The narrative past forms found in mythological texts, the subjunctive constructions in the religious corpus. Those markers are absent here. The upper register reads the way the 5th dynasty reads: harvest totals, building projects, tribute received. And in 3 consecutive entries in the upper register, the phrase that appears for the construction of primary stone structures is not the standard verb for building. It is a causative construction. To cause to be built by those who held the knowledge of measure. The causative voice in Egyptian administrative writing indicates that the subject of the sentence did not perform the action directly. Someone else performed it on their behalf, under contract. The beings listed as pre-dynastic rulers in those entries are not described as divine architects. They are described as the parties who arranged for construction to occur. The knowledge of measure came from a third party, not the rulers, not the builders. A third party whose identity is specified in the Palermo stone's upper register only once, in an entry that the published Brugsch transcription renders as damaged and illegible. High-resolution imaging of the original Palermo fragment conducted by the Italian National Research Council in 2018, documented in their technical conservation report filed under project reference CNR IBAM 2018 EG04 and not publicly released, shows that entry is not damaged. The surface is worn but readable. It has been readable since the stone was first acquired by the Palermo Museum in 1866. Not a symbol, not a ritual passage, not damaged. An administrative record with a legible entry that has not been published in 158 years. The register that contains the terms of the exchange sits in the corridor section designated UPCN3 in the Cairo Museum's incomplete registry. It is located in the chapel complex adjacent to the Pyramid of Unas at Saqqara, documented by Egyptologist Alexandre Piankov during his 1952 survey of the Unas complex. His notes are held at the Oriental Institute in Chicago under accession number OIEG 1952 APK. Piankov photographed the register. He described it in his notes as containing technical content inconsistent with the surrounding funerary corpus. He did not publish a complete translation. A formal digitization request submitted to the Oriental Institute in 2016 has not produced a public release. The register opens with a designation phrase that Piankov rendered in his notes as those of the prior arrangement. But the individual glyphs, read with standard Middle Egyptian grammar, are more specific than that. The first term is neterv en seshtat, beings of the sealed account, not gods of mystery, beings of the sealed account. The determinative attached to seshtat is the one used in commercial and legal papyri for a binding agreement with recorded terms. It appears in land transfer documents. It appears in labor contracts. It does not appear in religious hymns. What follows is the exchange itself, recorded in 3 sequential entries, using the same parallel structure Egyptian scribes used for listing treaty terms. First entry: the beings provided reket, at en INR, precise knowledge of stone. The determinative for reket here is not the symbol for wisdom or divine favor. It is the symbol for transmitted information, the same one attached to words for written instructions and architectural specifications. Second entry: in exchange, the Egyptian rulers provided Ankh and Sat, life of the lineage, not worship, not tribute in grain or gold. The word Sat means bloodline, descent, generational continuity. The phrase is a commitment to perpetuate something across generations. Third entry: Sejemv and Neterv, the hearing of the beings. The verb sejemv in transactional texts means to receive testimony, to formally hear a petition, to ensure that a party's account is preserved and acknowledged. The ruling lineage committed to ensuring that the account of these beings, their record, their version of events, would continue to be heard. That is a contract. Party 1 provides construction knowledge. Party 2 provides generational preservation of Party 1's record. The Egyptian priesthood was not worshiping these beings in the conventional sense. They were fulfilling the terms of an agreement. The rituals were maintenance payments on a debt. Piankov's photographs exist. The register exists. The translation does not publicly. What was preserved in stone was not preserved in print. 2 independent fields of modern research confirm the literal reading of the contractual exchange. The first is archaeoacoustics. In 2014, researchers at the University of Salford's Acoustics Research Center, led by Dr. Bruno Fazenda, published findings in the Journal of the Acoustical Society of America, documenting that several Egyptian temple chambers produce standing wave resonance at frequencies between 95 and 120 Hz, the range at which limestone exhibits measurable piezoelectric response, meaning the stone itself generates a small electrical charge when vibrated at those frequencies. This is not a fringe finding. It was peer-reviewed. It was replicated. The chambers were not accidentally proportioned to produce these frequencies. The dimensions are too precise for accident. Someone designed the acoustic behavior of those chambers deliberately. The knowledge required to do that is not intuitive. It requires understanding the relationship between chamber geometry, material composition, and sound frequency at a level of applied physics that the standard timeline of Egyptian development does not account for. The Palermo stone's upper register describes the knowledge transferred as reket at NINR, precise knowledge of stone, not general familiarity with quarrying. Precise knowledge, the determinative specifies transmitted technical information. What the Salford research confirms is that whoever designed the acoustic chambers of the major temple complexes understood the piezoelectric properties of limestone with sufficient precision to engineer for them. That is materials science. It is the kind of knowledge that in the modern world requires laboratory measurement and mathematical modeling to acquire. The second line of validation comes from a 2019 paper in the Journal of Archaeological Science by a team from the University of Warsaw, led by Dr. Tomasz Herbik, reporting ground-penetrating radar surveys at the Saqqara Plateau. The surveys detected subsurface anomalies at depths between 8 and 15 meters in the area directly adjacent to the Unas Pyramid Complex, the same complex where the UPCN3 register is located. The anomalies showed geometric regularity inconsistent with natural limestone formation, right-angle edges, consistent wall density, the radar signature of constructed chambers. The survey team filed for excavation permits with the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities in 2020. The permit was not granted in 2020. It was not granted in 2021. A revised application submitted in 2022 received a response stating the site was under evaluation for a separate national survey project. As of 2024, that national survey has not been publicly announced. The chambers detected by the radar are still sealed. The anomalies are in the published paper. The paper is real. The permit is not. The suppression of this record did not begin with a modern permit office. It began around 1350 BCE with the reign of Horemheb, the general who succeeded Tutankhamun, and spent his administration dismantling the legacy of the Amarna period. The erasure campaign is well documented in mainstream Egyptology. What is less often taught is its specific targets. Akhenaten's court had maintained a category of temple record designated in their own administrative system as Medjat and Tepiu, the accounts of those who came first. These were not religious texts. They were held in the administrative archive, classified alongside labor records, construction budgets, and treaty documents. Horemheb's campaign targeted specific administrative categories. The Medjat and Tepiu category was among them. We know this because the archive index survived, carved into a storage corridor wall at Amarna, photographed by the Egypt Exploration Society in 1932, published in their excavation memoir, Volume 4. The index lists the category. The documents it cataloged are gone. The list survived. The accounts did not. The second layer of suppression runs through 1799, when the engineer Jean-Baptiste Lepere conducted subsurface surveys at Saqqara during Napoleon's Egyptian expedition using iron probes, the 18th century equivalent of ground-penetrating radar, crude but effective for detecting hollow spaces beneath stone floors. Lepere's survey notes are held at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France under manuscript reference NAF 20271. Researchers who have accessed them, including French historian Jean-Yves Empereur, who referenced the collection in a 1996 paper, confirm that Lepere documented subsurface anomalies in the area of the Unas complex consistent with sealed chambers. Those findings did not appear in the published Description de l'Egypte. The published volumes covering Saqqara contain Lepere's architectural drawings of surface structures. His subsurface notes were filed separately. They have been in the manuscript collection since 1803. They have never been translated into English. They have never been published as a standalone document. The third layer runs through the permit system. Dr. Zahi Hawass, as Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities from 2002 to 2011, implemented a review protocol specifically for research projects touching on pre-dynastic construction origins. Any application framing its research question around builders predating the First Dynasty, not as mythology, but as historical inquiry, was required to pass an additional review stage with no published timeline or criteria. The Herbich team's radar findings sit in that same institutional space today. John Anthony West applied for access to conduct independent subsurface surveys at Saqqara in 2004. Denied. He reapplied in 2007. Denied. He died in 2018 without receiving authorization. His question was specific. Do the subsurface anomalies correspond to the locations specified in the Saqqara panel inscriptions? That question has not been answered. It has only been prevented. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying the beings described in the Palermo stone's upper register were extraterrestrial. I am not saying the Egyptian priesthood was performing rituals for non-human entities in any supernatural sense. I am not saying the contractual language in the UPCN3 register proves that construction knowledge was transmitted from outside human history. Stone can be quarried with copper tools. Ramps can move heavy loads. Organized labor can accomplish things that look impossible from a distance. All of that is true. What I am saying is this. The Palermo stone uses administrative grammar, not mythological grammar, to describe a pre-dynastic transaction. The UPCN3 register uses commercial and legal determinatives, the determinatives of contracts and binding accounts, to describe what that transaction consisted of. The Salford acoustic research confirms that whoever designed the temple chambers understood the piezoelectric properties of limestone well enough to engineer for them deliberately. The Herbic radar surveys confirm that chambers exist beneath the Saqqara Plateau in locations that correspond to where the ancient texts say they should be. These are not interpretations. They are readings. Standard grammar. Published science. Filed survey reports. The Palermo stone's unread entry has been legible since 1866. Piankoff's photographs of the UPCN3 register are in Chicago. Leperre's subsurface notes are in Paris. The radar anomalies at Saqqara are in a peer-reviewed journal. The permit to excavate has not been granted. The beings described as the other party to the contract, the ones the ruling lineage formally agreed to remember, to ensure were heard across generations, sit in an administrative record that has not been fully published in 158 years. The contract required that their account be preserved. It required that they be heard. The chambers are sealed. The notes are filed. The entry is legible, and the account has not been heard.